Welcome, hello, good evening. I am Pam Franks, the class of 1956 director of the Williams College Museum of Art, and I am so pleased to welcome you all to this evening's program. Let me start by saying it is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering virtually from the ancestral homelands of the Mohican, who are the indigenous peoples of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors past and future as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. So tonight, with incredible and enthusiastic delight, we welcome artist Carrie Mae Weems to the Northern Berkshires, Southern Vermont virtual domain. Carrie will be in conversation with 10 students from Bennington College, MCLA, and Williams. Carrie, thank you for being with us. And thank you to all who are participating. I also offer a special word of thanks to the co-sponsors along with WICMA for tonight's conversation, Williams College's Davis Center, and the Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Office of Special Academic Programs, and the Class of 1960 Scholars. Thank you all for helping make this conversation possible. And a big thank you to Rachel Chanoff and her wonderful team at the office who have coordinated this project across the country and have been a great joy for us all to work with. Two WICMA interns, Kimberly Ann Donis and Zoe Dobbuler, will moderate the discussion tonight, and they will offer a more fulsome introduction. But I want to take a moment to say how meaningful it is for WICMA to welcome Carrie Mae Weems. WICMA has a long relationship with the artist, and we are exceptionally fortunate to have works from her Kitchen Table series and the Hampton Project in our care in the museum collection. For us, Resist COVID Take 6 represents an important continuation of our museum's deep commitment to this brilliant artist, as well as being the powerful and timely project that it is. We'll hear a lot more about Resist COVID Take 6 tonight. It's been a terrific and collaborative Northern Berkshire, Southern Vermont activation as an outdoor exhibition across the region. We want to share a few images. Resist COVID Take 6 has been a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with Williams colleagues. Thank you to the 62 Center for Theater and Dance, the Davis Center and Office of Institutional Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and not pictured, but still partnering, Special Collections of the Williams College Library, who are working to archive responses to the project. This has also been an incredible regional collaboration, including with the town of Williamstown, with Mass MoCA, with the Clark Art Institute, with the Uzdan Gallery at Bennington College, with the Bennington Museum, with the town of Bennington, and with MCLA. This project has brought us together in a way that I truly hope will continue and grow, and I fully intend to do everything I can to ensure that that happens. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you to all the collaborators and to the student discussants joining the conversation tonight. Before I hand it over to Kim and Zoe, let me quickly mention by way of housekeeping that Kim and Zoe will continue the introduction. They will also later moderate the discussion. Following their introduction, Carrie Mae Weems will say a few words, and then there will be a discussion among the artist and the students. There will be no audience question and answer tonight so that we can retain the time for the discussion with the students. And there is a live captioning feature at the bottom right of your screen. If you do have any problems technology-wise, please let us know in the chat. So I'm so pleased to introduce two very special colleagues, Kimberly Andonis, WICMA's social justice intern, who is Williams College class of 2024, excuse me, second year student, and Zoe Dobbuler, a graduate intern at WICMA for the entire 2 years that she's been in the MA program in art history here at Williams. And this year she's serving as the public practice intern in engagement. So Kim, let me turn it over to you. And again, welcome to you, Carrie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Pam, for such a great introduction, and thank you to everyone for coming out tonight. My name is Kimberly Andonis, and I am a sophomore at Williams College and an intern at the Williams College Museum of Art. To some, you may already know as WICMA. I want to start off by thanking photographer, filmmaker, and installation artist Carrie Mae Weems for her newest project, Resist COVID, Take 6. This piece is an artist-driven public awareness campaign that aims to bring attention to the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. And the installation really works to expose the racial inequalities that have been exacerbated by the ongoing pandemic, intervening in public life and catalyzing collaboration and positive change. I truly had the fantastic opportunity to hop on this installation last September. And while working on this project, it has become abundantly clear to me that Take 6 is a public awareness campaign like no other. This campaign works in beautiful ways to create a sense of collective responsibility and support that speaks to all of our shared humanities. Even all the way from New York as a remote student, Take 6 has facilitated creative and exciting partnerships within my own life. And I'm sure many students later on in this conversation can say the same. Frankly put, this very conversation would not exist without the community the community this project has made. And that reality is truly what made my entire internship has been founded on collaboration. This campaign has really forced me to think critically and beyond myself about the crucial issues of public health and the ways in which COVID-19 has affected the communities I consider myself to be a part of. And in addition to the invaluable experience of learning the ropes of executing public art projects and honestly learning what goes on behind the scenes at museums, this installation has given me and a number of other individuals the space to brainstorm the creative ways in which we can engage the Williams community with the very art WICMA immerses itself in. And in a side effort to give the Williams community something small but powerful, Zoe and I, as Pam mentioned, Zoe, who I will also later introduce to the screen with the help of WICMA, worked very hard to design and initiate a tote bag campaign to share the project with every Williams student and give them the opportunity to reflect on and interact with the work. And you may sit here and ask why tote bags, and the answer for Zoe and I truly is the fact that who doesn't love tote bags? Zoe and I both go to attend Williams College, and it's a liberal arts college, and there are just a few things that the Williams campus loves more than a free tote bag loaded with beautiful and socially aware art. So once again, I want to thank WICMA for allowing me to help them tackle such a large installation. And I want to thank Carrie for once again going on yet another beautifully complex creative endeavor. And on that note, I want to introduce Zoe to the screen.
Hi, good evening, and thank you so much, Kim. My name is Zoe Dobbuler, and I'm a second-year master's student, as Pam mentioned, in art history at Williams, as well as an intern at the Williams College Museum. And I really just want to reiterate so much of what Kim just said. This project has been such a meaningful one to be a part of, and I'm so happy that it could culminate in a project, in an event like this, that's about bringing people together and starting conversation. Because I think that's so much of what the Take 6 campaign aims to do and what it does so powerfully. And now I'm very excited and very honored to introduce Carrie Mae Weems by way of a short introduction, a short bio, before I invite her to our virtual stage to introduce her work. So through image, text, film, video, performance, and her many lectures, presentations, and convenings with individuals across disciplines, Carrie Mae Weems has created a complex body of work that centers on her overarching commitment to helping us better understand our present by examining our collective past. Determined as ever to enter the picture, both literally and metaphorically, Weems has sustained an ongoing dialogue within contemporary discourse for over 35 years and is considered one of the most influential artists working today. Exploring and untangling issues of race, gender, and class, her works create spaces for action and for conversation. She has participated in numerous solo and group exhibitions in the US and abroad, and her works have been collected by institutions across the globe, And as has been mentioned, we're so lucky to have a few of her pieces here at Williams. And now I have the absolute privilege of welcoming Carrie Mae Weems onto our virtual stage here to give a short introduction to her work before we dive into the conversation. So welcome to Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe and Kimberlyn and Pamela Frank, who I've known for a number of years, and we've worked on a number of projects together. And it's wonderful to be back at Williams College, even virtually. I have had wonderful, wonderful experiences at Williams over the years. It's been a wonderful anchor and a surprising anchor for me in the over maybe a 15-year span now. I've been working in some way or another with Williams College, and welcome also to the other students who are on this committee from Bennington and from the other universities and colleges as well. It's really a pleasure to be with you, and I'm looking forward to the questions that you might have of me. I'm hoping that I'm able to answer at least some of them. What I thought I'd do very quickly is to share with you some of the images that come out of the COVID project. So I'm going to share my screen, and forgive me if I stumble a bit, but we're all getting used to this new technology and new ways of having conversation with one another. I'll just simply say this. I started this project with actually one of my closest friends, Pierre Leving. We were talking one evening about COVID just about a year ago, just as the pandemic was becoming known actually as a pandemic. And we were just entering the first phase, the first days of the lockdown. We knew immediately that people of color, Black people, Latinos, and Native Americans would be the most impacted by COVID because they were indeed the frontline workers. And so we knew that we needed to do something, and we needed to do something very fast. And I started working on this project then maybe 5-6 days into the lockdown, and just began to really think about the kinds of images that needed to be made, the kinds of questions that needed to be asked, and to really consider the target audience, and to really think about the ways in which the image and text and language and tone were all working together in order to amplify the necessity and the importance of this project, not only for people of color, but for the larger community. We know now that we have a vaccine. Unfortunately, I've taken mine. I've had both my shots, but we also know that there is great hesitancy and resistance to taking the vaccine. So I'm starting actually with the vaccine before I actually show you other things, thinking about text, thinking about language, that the vaccine is our best shot against COVID-19, thinking that I didn't want to tell people what to do, but that I wanted to suggest that maybe there was something that we might be able to do in order to get to the other side of this drastic pandemic that has affected us all in enormous ways. We started the project with a series of strategies related to, again, the public, materials that would be in print form, through billboards and posters and lawn signs and broadsides, inserts into public newspapers and the city newspaper and city newspapers, just thinking about every conceivable strategy that we could think of or that I could think of that would be important. Should we use newspapers? Should we use bags? Should we use shopping bags? Should we use buttons? Should we use magnets? All of those ideas really constantly kind of moving around in my mind as I process what I thought this work could be. One of the more interesting things that has come out of making this project, of course, has been my relationship with institutions and the way in which a number of cultural institutions have taken on the project. Museums have been an important factor. Universities had been an important factor in helping us to broaden the idea. And we've worked now in maybe 20, 25 cities around the country and internationally. So from Philadelphia to Austria, we've been involved with this campaign, pushing it, and pushing it, trying to make sure that we were getting out ahead of this thing that we knew was important, wanting to thank the workers of the world for their involvement and their investment, knowing again that they were the frontline workers and wanting to thank them up front and almost immediately. Using different language, we wanted to use English, Spanish, and native languages too, which became in some ways more complicated, and we can discuss that a bit later. Again, we use lawn signs, we use posters. We ask certain kinds of questions about inequity and or inequality and the impact on Black, Brown, and Native people. And we knew that to a certain extent, there would be a certain kind of resistance. And so I made a piece on maybe on your left and my right, that of course all life matters. But the point is that we have to be aware that people of color have been more impacted by this virus than any other. And of course, the Native communities have been even the most impacted by COVID in terms of in relationship to its number in relationship to its population. And so we used fans. We used shopping bags, giving them to food banks because we understood at a certain point that the lines for food banks were getting longer and longer and longer. I did a report yesterday for someone in New York alone. 1 in 4 people have been infected and impacted rather by COVID-19. And so we knew that people that were losing their jobs, people that were housing insecure, were also food insecure. We needed to address that. We needed to address ideas about safe distance and thinking again about the various strategies that we might use. I think I can safely say that in a lot of ways, that this has been a labor of love. It's been something born out of my commitment to my community, both near and far, in order to highlight the importance of this pandemic that is impacting us all in one way or another. My hope is that we'll see one another on the other side of midnight. And so I know that the students have prepared questions, and I think maybe it might be best now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment and go back to the students and their questions that maybe I might be able to answer.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for that fantastic sort of overview and introduction to the project. I'd like to now invite the rest of the students onto the screen. Everyone can come up, and once everyone is here, so lovely to see everyone, we will start our introductions, and maybe I'll first pass it to Petra, and then everyone can just pass it along to the next student.
Hi, I'm Petra Hines. I'm a first year at Williams College, and I am a prospective political economy major and global studies concentrator. I will pass it to Ara.
Hi, I'm Ara. I'm a senior at Bennington College, and I study photography, visual arts, education, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Maybe next we'll go to, oh yeah.
I pass it on to Spobo.
Hi, my name is Bobo, and I'm a senior at Bennington College. I study photography and public action. I'm really excited to be here.
Great, thank you.
Oh,
I'm looking forward to knowing more about public action and what you do. I think it's fascinating that, you know, many years ago, I started these kinds of projects a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago. Indeed, I taught one of them at Williams College, thinking about these ideas about art and action and the ways in which universities might need to prepare themselves for a future like this, where art and activism, art and community purpose would become really essential to the university and to their students. And now that has happened. It took a long time, but I'm really thrilled and delighted to see it, Bobo. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to Alejandro.
Hello, my name is Alejandro. I am a senior at Williams College. I study art history and studio arts, and I'm a 1960s scholar in the dance department.
Oh.
I will pass it on to Nick.
Hello, I'm Nick. I'm a senior at Williams, and I'm studying art history and political science, and I'll pass it on to Nee.
Hi, my name is Nee. I'm a junior at MCLA, and I study art design. I'll pass this on to Kaylin.
Nina, did you say art and design?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kaylin Gibson. I am a junior at Williams College, and I study art history and Spanish. And I will pass it on to Ashanti.
Hi, my name is Ashanti. I'm a senior at MCLA. I study studio arts.
What in particular, Ashanti? What are you doing in studio arts?
For studio arts, right now, I'm more on the, how do you want to say, illustration side of it.
Okay.
I once was on the design, but now I'm on illustration.
I see. Okay, good. Good to know. Okay.
Fantastic. I think that's everyone. And so I think just to get us started, the students, we've prepared a whole range of questions on different themes and topics related to the project. But I just want to get us started off, to take a moment sort of to reflect on where we all are. And we're a year into this pandemic, and it's sort of a very bizarre anniversary that we're all marking. And there's very much a light at the end of the tunnel, as you mentioned, but I think most of us are very much still in it. So just to kick things off, Carrie, I wanted to ask if you've developed any sort of pandemic rituals, either things really just to get you through the day, or even things that you've found joy in during this very strange time.
Oh, well, you know, I work. So throughout this entire pandemic, I have worked on the pandemic. Right? I've worked on the pandemic. I've worked on the pandemic. I've worked on its meaning. I've worked on its implication. And it's been, I didn't think that it would be, but it's been somewhat of a solace in a way, right? It's been a way of anchoring me. It's been a way of grounding me. It's been a way of me really dealing with it, right? A lot of people have been asking, what do I do during this time? How do I deal with this? So I've had my work actually to really sort of see me through, you know? And so there's something I think about service, about the benefit of service, about the joy of service, about the growth that one experiences through service, through working with, in some way, in one way or another, collaborating with my partners and my friends in order to push forward an idea. So that has been, it's been difficult. I won't say that it hasn't been difficult. Not being able to see my friends in a regular way, my family in a regular way, or to have, friends over for dinner in a regular way, or to meet someone in a regular way, or to go to a museum in a regular way. All those things have had, of course, tremendous impact on all of us. And yet the work has been really important, and it's been a way of pulling me through. And so I'm very grateful for it, and I'm grateful for all of you for thinking about it. And I'm very much interested in knowing the ways in which you've actually thought about this project and its usefulness, and what you actually think about the strategies that have actually been engaged, that you found either useful or not particularly useful in relationship to how the material has made its way into your public space.
Thank you. Your words about collaboration definitely resonated with me. And I just wanted to kind of start off by asking you, how did you stumble upon photography as your main art medium? I know this is probably a question you've been asked a multitude of times.
But it's an important one. Absolutely, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Oh, I came to photography fairly early. I had thought about, I've always been interested in the arts, of course. Since I was a very young person, some form of art. I didn't know what I was going to do, if I was going to be a dancer or an actor, but my boyfriend gave me a camera when I was about, I'm not really sure, it was either 18 or 20, something like that. And I immediately took to it. And I've been using the camera in some form or fashion ever since.
Coming back a little bit when you were talking about sort of things that would be regular, sort of the regular way we used to do things, and sort of before the pandemic, the way things happened. And one of your posters, some of the text is, "Don't worry, we'll hold hands again." And I think that's something that, right, especially now as the vaccine pushes forward, as we see maybe sort of a light at the end of the tunnel, holding hands again, question mark, like holding hands again, maybe not with the same people, maybe not in the same way. How is it different? How do we come out of this in a different way? Or do we? Or are we really going back to what used to be? Are we really going back to holding hands again? Or are we just holding hands differently now, if that makes sense?
Well, I think that it's actually a very interesting question for several reasons. The future will never be like the past. We're always changing. We're always changing, and we're always remaining the same, right? Even as we change. And so it's a really interesting idea. I think that what this thing has done for us, and one of the things that it has done for us, and one of the extraordinary things that we've seen over the course of this pandemic is the killing of George Floyd. And the uprising, the international uprising, not only in the United States, but around the world, of resistance, of people saying, this will not be tolerated. That is absolutely new on our planet, right? We had the civil rights movement. We've had many different movements in this country, but this was a reckoning, was a tremendous moment. And so now we have the opportunity to decide if we're going to do things the old way, or if we're going to do things a new way. What does the future offer us? So coming out of it, I have no idea, right? But coming out of it, what do you want then for yourselves in relationship to the moment and in relationship to the future? How do you want things to be different? If we are talking about change, insisting that it must happen, then how do you act in your everyday life to foster that? Whether you are with people or in your small studio room alone. But I think it's sort of a wonderful question. How do we redefine and reshape the future, as we know that it is also a part of the changing same? Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the very thoughtful answer.
First of all, I just love the idea of the changing same. And I feel like that's such a powerful distinction, or such a powerful sort of way to think about the ways in which we're seeing a lot of inequities that have always existed, just sort of being recycled and reframed in a new way as we encounter a new crisis and a new historical moment. And I think something that struck us as so powerful about this project is the way that that is communicated and sort of the medium through which that message has been communicated so widely, sort of through these various different activations. And I know Sabobo had a question related to that, thinking about sort of the way that we're getting the message out and sort of thinking through how the everyday and how the changing same are coming together sort of in this very multifarious activation.
Thank you, Zoe. My first interaction with the Take Six project, it made me think a lot about the appropriation of graffiti. Like the first time I saw it, it was on one of our dining hall walls, and it felt like something a Bennington skater boy would have sprayed. And that made me like take back and actually wonder about like your intentions for that. And are you trying, is this an attempt at appealing to a wider audience by using such a casual medium? Because I know you have like prestigious works that are in institutions, you have beautiful photo books, but this is something that you can even go up and touch and it's not a problem. So like, are you appealing to everyone or a specific group by using this medium?
Well, public art is just that, isn't it? It takes it out of the museum, out of the gallery, out of the sort of the confines of the private space, and it puts us in public. It's in public. And while I am often thinking about, you know, as I said earlier, that we understood that brown people and Native Americans would be seriously impacted by COVID-19, along with workers. And but I'm always thinking, so I'm thinking about the specific groups that I'm trying to really have a conversation with. Therefore, I'm thinking about the use of English, the use of Spanish, the use of, you know, particular native languages in order to seep into those communities, right? That community needs to be more aware than any other community that they are the most impacted. I mean, the numbers were extraordinary. 82% of the deaths in Chicago, 84% of the deaths in Atlanta, 82% of the deaths in Louisville. People of color, right? That needed to be driven home. But of course, I care about people also. And so I'm interested in having a conversation with people that are interested in having a conversation. Right? I'm interested in people who are interested in having a conversation. And so if the work, you know, and so I'm always thinking about the way I craft a language, the way that I use language, the way that I bend a note in order for it to reverberate beyond the intended and to land beyond that, right? In the hopes that it will pull in anyone that's interested in having the conversation, anyone who has the concern, then this is for you. The information is for you. And so absolutely, I think it's really important to work in the public. And I've done several public art projects, and I hope to do more. I think that it's been very important to be outside of the museum, that you don't have to spend any money to participate in this thing that is artistic, but it's also a public art project. And so I've always insisted that it is an artist-driven public art campaign, an artist-driven thing, right? So that I'm really thinking about the images and what those images look like, how they feel, all those things, but I'm not trying to sell you something. I'm simply offering up a set of ideas that maybe we might want to consider, and that's different. So there is nothing to consume, right, in that way, which I think is very important. I hope anyway, and I hope that I've achieved that. We don't always achieve what we hope for. Sometimes we fail, but that's the intent. Thank you for the question.
No, thank you for the answer. Your answer really got me thinking a lot about intentionality, and really has me thinking. I've seen a couple of these photos before, years before, at the Brooklyn Museum, and I think the intentionality of these photographs changed once they were compiled within Take 6. And Nick really had a great question regarding this and kind of just the process behind selecting these images for Resist COVID.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So I was curious about the selection process behind these photographs that were used for the project. Like Kim says, many of these photographs are from prior collections. So what did this selection process look like, and what made you and what inspired you to use these specific photographs for the Take 6 project?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, no matter what, I'm an artist, right? And I'm working alone. I'm in my studio, right? Often alone. And so I don't have like, you know, like a team of professional taskmasters around me saying, you know, we should do this because it works this way, and we should do that because it works that way. You know, I mean, I am an artist. And so in a lot of ways, I really do work intuitively. I've used probably all of the work comes out of something that I made before. I haven't made, I've only made photographs and films of the demonstrations that happened this summer. So we were in lockdown, and I had to make some decisions really about what I thought would be most effective. Then I realized, and this is something for all of you that are with me today as artists, art historians, political scientists, whatever your thing is, what you're doing right now is really sort of really shaping and bending your notion of yourself and the deep questions that you have about the world. That's what you're doing, right? And 20 years later, you'll be asking pretty much the same question. And one of the things that I realized in my work is that I've been asking the same question since the beginning. So for instance, the work that I pulled together from Don't Worry, You'll Hold Hands Again, or what I'm telling you is that Blacks and Native Americans have been the most impacted. Well, I made that work at the Museum of Modern Art. The Museum of Modern Art in the 60s, the 50s, 70s had very, very few African Americans related to it. Very few African Americans went to the museum. I was commissioned to do a project there, and I decided to restage, to bring together a group of people who had historically not ever been together at MoMA. Right? So I took images that had been made there and I restaged those moments using a diverse group of people. And then I realized, of course, that the same material was useful now because it was asking the same question, just in a different context, right? And so, you know, if I sort of slice through the undercurrent of the work that I've made over the last 40 years, the essential questions remain the same. And the only difference is how I enter the discussion at any given moment and how I might highlight or magnify or amplify one body of work over another, or stress a slightly different concern, right? But the core concerns are exactly the same, which allowed me to go into my storage room, which is just right over there, and pull out a group of images that were apropos to the moment. Right? And it sort of goes back again to this notion that Amiri Baraka came up with many years ago about the idea of the changing same. How are you different? And how are you the same, even as you grow, even as you change? What are the core questions that you're asking yourself? And so the core question that I'm asking myself around the pandemic is, what are the issues around inequity that we need to unpack? Why is it that people of color are more impacted by this virus than any other? Right? And so the material is the same, because the issues around inequality and inequity in relationship to brown bodies are the same in the country. We haven't quite evolved beyond that, right? So I think maybe we might be beginning to ask the questions in new ways, or we're beginning to think that there are new resolutions to our problems. And of course, I'm leaving all of that up to you guys. And Nick, did I answer your question?
You did, that was great, thank you.
I was really interested when you talked about the intuitive nature of your work. Like, you're an artist, and I study photography, but I think of art as a way of life and a constant engagement with the developing of these questions, as you were mentioning. And through engaging with your work, but also engaging with the current socio-political moment that we're in globally. I was just back home in India as well, and with the movement that's happening back there as well. I really connected to what you were talking about, this reckoning that's happening and this development of questions. And I realized that it's also this relationship between the internal reckoning and the reckoning that's happening outside, and that relationship. Yeah. And I would be really curious to hear a little bit more about, like how that relationship between the internal and the outside developed for you, because I've been really faced with this understanding that I am the oppressor and I am the oppressed, and I need to come to terms with the complexities of who I am in order to be able to engage with the work of the world in any conscious manner.
Well, I think that's a really great question. And I do believe that we live our lives. We live our lives. And so as an artist, as a person, as a person that's interested in dynamic change, how do you live your life? Who's in your life? Who are your friends? Who are you speaking to? Who are you going out with? How is it evident in the way in which you live your life? And I think that is probably and perhaps one of the greatest challenges for most of us, right? That we remain in our silos. What is your question for yourself? What is one of the deep questions that you have to ask and answer for yourself? Maybe you'll never come to the answer, but you will always be answering the question. Right? Which I think is fascinating in and of itself, and that a part of life's journey, the journey, again, as an artist, as a person. And the thing that's, of course, interesting about artists and about people that are involved in the cultural sphere is that we're trying to understand and make simultaneously, right? Understand and push out into the world the expressive nature of ourselves, which is the reason that we love music, we love literature, we love dance, these other forms that allow us to understand ourselves in a more complex way. But I do think that one of the tasks ahead for me always, and probably for you, is to begin to ask the question and then to spend many years refining it. And as you refine, the work will change. The work will begin to express the nature of the way in which you're asking the question today, as opposed to when you were a 15-year-old, or as opposed to when you were a 10-year-old, right? Now you are a 20-some-odd-year-old woman, and so you can articulate what you were feeling when you were 15. Which I think is really sort of wonderful. And the beauty of being involved in the arts is that we have the chance to express these complicated feelings and emotions that we can't always put words to. Oh, of course, I'm not a writer. A writer would be more apt and able to do that. But I think your idea that, you know, you are the oppressor and the oppressed is a very interesting one. And so that tells me a little bit about your experience. And I think it's a fascinating question to be asking at this moment.
Yeah, I have a question sort of to that point of being oppressor and oppressed, and then also just around like Sabobo's points about public art and thinking about the image that you put at the MoMA and then brought here and into this project. I was just wondering about the significance of putting this work that elevates Black people, people of color, Indigenous people, and bringing that to a space like ours, which is such a predominantly white space, the significance of that, and then also the problems around doing that.
Well, that's a great question. So let me ask you what you think about that. Because I think, you know, my work is the work. So I'm interested in having a dialogue with just about anybody, as I said, who's interested in having a dialogue with me. Your institution, people at your institution decided that they really needed this project and really wanted this project, really wanted to amplify. And they're using it in a lot of ways to amplify around these sort of questions of color in the context of a very tumultuous time. And of course, a lot of it came out of the tremendous protest movements of the past. Not only the killing of George Floyd, but the killing of Trayvon Martin, the killing of Eric Garner, the killing of Breonna Taylor, the killing of Daron White, the killing, right? I mean, you know, I have a list that's just right here, right? I can list them all. But finally, there was a straw that broke the camel's back. In the middle of a pandemic, right? In the middle of the pandemic, this thing happened. And so I think that in a lot of ways, a number of cultural institutions that have not historically had significant conversations with brown people, right? Understood that there was a moment that they needed to do some soul searching and some reckoning too. And that this was an important project to bring forth to a community that needed to understand something about what was going on in the world around it. So I know that that's happening, but there may be other reasons as well. And I would certainly love to hear from you all about why you think it was important to bring this project to Williams College and to this part of Massachusetts. Do you want to speak to that, Petra?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think that it's important for so many of the people here have so much privilege and for so long have had the privilege to ignore these issues. And so many of them, yes, COVID, it should have been this great equalizer, and yet it fully was not. And so I do think that these, even though we are not the groups who have been affected the most by COVID, we are the groups who most need to like see these inequities in our country, in our society, and who previously had been able to ignore them. That's kind of how I feel about it.
And you were also, you know, at a university. You are also going to become you are our future. You are the voices of our future, right? What you see, what you learn on that campus at your colleges and universities, hopefully you will be sharing with us in a multitude of ways as you go forth, right? And so to that extent, it becomes, I think, even that much more important that Williams and the universities that have taken on this project have done so, right? Because I think it speaks not only to the way in which the institution speaks outside of itself, but also to itself about what's important and redefining what's important as you build an education. What do people really need to know? And how do they need to know it? And what are the terms on which they come to know it? So you're absolutely right. The pandemic has, in one way, it's been a great equalizer, and it's also heightened inequity at the same time, right? We're all in lockdown, right? We've all been impacted in one way or another by this, but some more than others for historically significant reasons. And that needs to be explored. And it gives you, I think, all ways of reimagining your investment in the unpacking of our cultural problems and difficulties.
Something that I find especially significant about the sort of the placement, the location, the regionality of this particular project is exactly to Petra's point of sort of the demographic makeup of the area, right, and really highlighting sort of a Black, Brown, and Indigenous grief in a predominantly white region, but to the same extent also sort of highlighting the predominantly in that phrase of there's still very much an Indigenous presence. There's still very much a Black presence, a Brown presence, a Latino presence that, however small it might be, is in fact here in these sort of, in maybe the lesser seen and lesser known points of the region. Right? So I think the point that I'm getting at is that this sort of the use of the Spanish language, right? The use of the bodies and the people that these photographs evoke, the images, the stories that these photographs evoke in a place that otherwise can very easily and very often does, right? Sort of erase and ignore and look away from where the struggle and the challenge and the grief sits most deep in a region like this, right? A particularly affluent, predominantly white region of Massachusetts.
You're also very close to Adams, which is one of the poorest areas in Massachusetts, and Springfield, which is a poor area of. I mean, right? It's like an area that's like that, right? Where there are many different people. And so it's interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't get to Williams. I don't know exactly where the materials are placed. I would love to really know this. But so then the question is, and so I'm going to ask you all, and I want to hear your responses. And Nick, I also want to hear from you as one of the, the only white guys who are on the panel. Excuse me for calling you out, but it's true. I'm assuming that in part, if you decide that you want to have a conversation with a number of different people and that the conversation needs to be had, then one of the things that the piece does, or the works do, is to show a body, a persistence of vision that is often not seen in the area at all publicly, right? It thanks the workers. So it has like a tie to the working class communities around it, right? It has a tie to that because there is a large working class presence in the area, but it also starts to speak differently, right? That it is, the institution that is insisting that this is a conversation that the community actually needs to be aware of and involved in, right? And you don't have to come into the institution or the museum to see it, right? It is present. So that's one thing. Now, I'd like to hear from you about how you think the piece actually works. Ara, I'm going to start with you, and then Nick, and then Petra and Kimberlyn, and Alejandro.
Yeah, I
How do
think
you think the pieces work in their in terms of the way they're situated and where they're situated? I just love to hear this.
so. It's actually really interesting. I haven't seen your work in person yet because I'm in quarantine and I just got back to the US.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But from what I know and from what the photographs that have been shared with me, I think it's really interesting because one of the pieces is located on Four Corners in Bennington, which is like a place of like constant movement and like and it's always there, it's always present. And what I really liked about this piece, and in your introduction, you also mentioned this, that it was written for our marginalized populations. It was written keeping them in mind. Mm-hmm. And I think that intentionality really comes through just by like going through your work in this sense. So yeah.
Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, I think a lot of the power behind this work comes from the activation that you see on campus. And I think you've touched on this, but the fact that it's not within the museum, it's on the walls, it's on bags people are carrying around, grabbing lunch, things like that. You can't avoid the message on the bag. You can't avoid sort of the significance of the project. I think that's really powerful, that you don't actually have to go into the museum to see it, but it confronts the whole public. And with the combination and collaboration with different groups within the area, I think that's pretty powerful, and I think it's something that should definitely be utilized in the future as well.
Thank you. Petra?
Yeah, something that really, I mean, your project, it struck all of us as soon as we got here, because once we checked in, we were given the tote bags and the postcards. I mean, I want some. But something else that stands out to me about it is what you've been saying about engaging with those who want to engage with your work, because I do think that those students here who aren't willing to take a second glance just walk by. And so it's an interesting sort of double situation where the people who are looking and asking themselves questions about it, there's, so much to think about and talk about. But those who just walk by, by.
Kim?
Hi, thank you. I actually have been remote this whole year, so I haven't personally experienced the installation at Williams campus, but surprisingly,
you have things on your wall.
Oh, I do, yes. But I actually have experienced the work at another college. I'm not sure if it was Parsons or NYU, but just one of the colleges in the city. They have many buildings. I walked past and it was like similar to what Nick said. It's very confrontational. It was just like bright lit in the middle at like 2 a.m. in the middle of the city. I look up and I just see "Stay safe, we can all hold hands again." And it was really powerful for me. And I think definitely, I definitely see the aspect of what Petra's saying, where people only like you engage with the people who want to engage with the art. And I think like the communities I'm within obviously like would love to engage with the art, but I also, just from my understanding of what's been happening on campus, there are a lot of people who obviously haven't chosen to engage with the art, but also like would deeply benefit from it. So I do think there's a level to this activation where we're trying to get communities that really need to be in these conversations to be in these conversations. And it really is, it comes down to the individual. And I think that's a level of it. I think WICMA has really, with this installation, has given people kind of the artistic agency to kind of learn more about inequality and disenfranchisement. And it really is up to the individual, especially at such like, a great college. It's really up to the individual to take it upon themselves to realize, hey, this art is grounded in real inequality, real grief, real struggle. And I know I've definitely walked away understanding that, even as someone who hasn't been on campus since early last year. And I truly hope more people feel this way.
This is very interesting. And Alejandro, have you been engaged at all with people who question the project? for instance?
Not in any direct way. I think I would echo sort of some of what Kim and Petra were saying, where there were there's those that you have the conversation with those that are willing to have the conversation. I think I haven't had any conversation where there's direct sort of disagreement or conflict with the project, largely because I think those that are noticing the project are typically students and community members that are engaged with the arts and engaged with the College Museum. That tends to be a pretty homogenous intellectualism to a large degree. I think where you start to see some of the biggest maybe conflict is in the use of language, which I mentioned before. Conflict in the sense that, for example, in terms of placement, one of the few in Spanish that I've seen in the Williamstown area is on the side of one of the theaters of the 62 Center for Theater and Dance. It's a giant performing arts center with a really strong, loud architectural presence right on Route 2, which is the giant highway that runs, well, giant highway, the very long highway that runs right through the center of town and runs all the way to Boston.
I know Route 2 well.
Yeah, that is the one big poster that's in Spanish, and it's the one that says "Un poco de distancia hace mucho," right? A little distance goes a long way. You don't, and right next to, right at in the main lobby is the very large in red, the poster thanking the workers. The 62 Center being a space where you don't often have a working class population that is attending these grand, very sort of white collar performing arts shows, where you don't have programming that is ever, if at all, in Spanish. Or at least bilingual. It's a very English, it's a very American, it's a very specific flavor of what culture is and what culture is to be represented and showcased, especially in the summer when we have the Williamstown Theater Festival, which, I mean, I think there's a point to be made about sort of the students of color that have a strong dance presence and cultural presence on campus that perform in the 62 Center. The playwrights and artists that are invited with the Williamstown Theater Festival, I think there is absolutely, right, I don't think it's quite so black and white. That being said, there's something that the 62 Center of Theater and Dance in Williams College stands for that is antithetical to a lot of the message that is being plastered on top of it. And I think echoes that message of a lot of this is topical. It's superficial.
Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. But could suggest, I know that we're going to be getting off soon, but I wonder if in part, another way of thinking about it, when I see things that interest me that I don't understand, I go home and I read about it. I mean, right? Is there a way in which something so antithetical to the sort of normal use, something so big, does it beg the question that needs to be understood, right? That it needs to be understood. And so it could be that as opposed to a negative, that it's actually a really smart move. And these are things that I think about a lot, right? When do I use certain kind of, when do I use, creek as opposed to Sioux? When do I use Spanish as opposed to English? I mean, these are really interesting questions. So I know that it's time for us to wrap up, and so I should probably step back for a moment and. Is it Joe Allen is going to maybe close us out? Hello?
I think, Carrie, if you are available, we have a few more questions, or Pam, if you're back.
I was just jumping on to actually say, I think there were just a couple of students who didn't have a chance to answer their questions. If you possibly have a few more minutes to hear.
Yes. I have a few more minutes. I have been online for a long time today. I had a great conversation also today with the National Gallery, and it was fantastic about another project. But this has been really delightful. I'm so glad that I was here. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm all ears.
Yes, just like, oh, sorry. I just
Please.
wanted to kind of hand it off to Kaylin, because I think your words about resistance and kind of back to Alejandro's idea about like, well, the reality that a lot of the work is antithetical to the fact that Williams, like being Williams, is a predominantly white institution. And I think Kaylin really had a great question just about resistance that I would really love to kind of introduce. Yes.
Hey, please.
Yeah, so I've just been sort of listening to the conversation that's been taking place, and it's actually sort of made me change my question as the conversation has been going on. And so originally I was going to ask about what did you think the limitations of the language that you utilized like within the images were, especially considering how images of people of color don't often speak for themselves. But now I think my question is more so concerned with the transformative power of those limitations. And you say that you go home, if you don't know something, then you go home and you read about it. But what are other transformative ways to sort of emphasize, right, like this dissonance, right, like this disconnect between communities and cultures that you're trying to emphasize within the work?
You know, Caitlin, I don't know. What I do know is that if you're not curious about the world, then you're not curious. Doesn't matter pretty much what you see. So, you know, somebody can sell you anything, right? But if you're curious, then I think that the work suggests that there are questions to be explored. Not necessarily answered, but again, questions to be explored, and questions and ideas to be embraced, right? I mean, the idea of don't worry, we will hold hands again is beyond, it's beyond race, it's beyond class, it's beyond gender. It is simply hope, and using primarily the Black body as a way of speaking about hope. Right? I'm very much aware of the way in which Black subjects have been used historically, right? You know, to use the Black subject as a stand-in for the universal is an important idea to me, and it's something that an idea that I've worked with for a long time. How do we stand for more than simply ourselves and the color of our skin, right? And how do you imbue that and use that and build the image and build a language around it that maybe allows for the public to embrace it and to embrace us in a larger way, in a more complex way. Thank you for the question, Caitlin.
No, thank you. It's fascinating, your ideas around curiosity and exploration. So thank you for that.
I mean, it really is that, right? You know, if you're not curious, if you don't care, you don't care.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't matter who you are. If you don't care, you don't care. Right? Some people are too busy to care. Right? They're so wrapped up. They're so wrapped up in their own lives that thinking about anything else outside of their immediate family, which is also very interesting. There've been fascinating studies done around this as well. Right? Right? They don't look outside of their own families. Well, historically, brown people have always had to look outside their own family, right? Right? We have this vast extended family connected through a set of social conditions that connect us in a very unique way, and that also give us a sort of unique vantage point from which to pull from, which I think is sort of fantastic. Even in all of its difficulty and in some of its horror, it gives us like this amazing sensitivity to the world and to our humanity that I think, or to humanity that I think is really important. And so, you know, it comes through in the music and the dance and the language and the way of being and the sort of embrace. It is this openness. It's an open culture. It's very interesting. And so we talk about we. We talk about we. Right? It's a unique vantage point. And we use it often in the language. So, okay, are there any other more questions? I'm gonna go have dinner with my husband sometime soon.
I'd love to hand it off to Nee and Ashanti. They are artists and practitioners, and they have engaged with your work in such wonderful ways. So I would love to invite their questions next.
I'll go then. So at MCLA, we're doing similar work to what you've been doing with take COVID into our work, where we are trying to make a more positive relationship between the staff members and the white community with the people of color on our community. And one of the questions that popped up was the word help. And you'd hear this often through like help orphanage or help people and etc. What do you think about the word help itself? Because to me, it felt overused, but there's no other word to replace it, I guess. So
give me an example. Use help in context.
So like, for example,
how have you been using help?
Like I'd see this in various different advertisements on TV where you see help animal shelters or like help people of color, help, just like the word help in general with like uses in many different cases in like the health industry or society itself. So I was wondering what you think of the word help.
Well, you know, that's it. I'm not absolutely sure. I'm not sure, but I think that I understand the intonation of what you're getting at, or the implication. And it's sort of related to what we were talking about with Caitlin. You know, the idea that that you quote help means that you're kind of over here, right? And you're gonna assist those people, as opposed to being in it, being inside of it, and assisting, right? Working together and collaborating, working together to solve a problem, right? And so there's something, I think that what you're getting at is that it's kind of a pejorative, that I'm going to help those people. We're going to help those, rather than another term. And I don't know exactly what that would be at this very moment, but I do think that it exists outside of the idea of we and us, and it becomes them and they, right? And so when it's them and they, it's always something that you can dismiss. And when it's us, it's something that you have to work on, and you have to find collaborations, right? And ways of helping one another so that we help ourselves, right? We're helping one another so that we can help ourselves. I'm helping you because you're helping me, and we're in it together. We're in it together. And that's a different thing. It's a different thing. And so I think that this is a very important question. The difference between them and us. I'm a part of us. I've always seen myself framed in us. And so I've never thought that I was helping anybody but myself. I'm helping me survive. I'm helping me live. I'm helping me to be the best person that I can be. I'm helping me by working with you. By talking to you this evening, I'm helping me. I'm growing through my involvement in having this conversation with you. And there are some other spaces that, you know, we can go in this conversation. And I want to say this: you are Asian, and I am reminded of what has been happening in our country to the Native and Asian populations and how Asians have been treated during the pandemic, and wanting to make work around that I think is also important, and it begs a question as well. And so I've been talking with a group of artists here at Syracuse University to figure out ways of doing this sort of successfully and impactfully. It's been a very interesting question, and that's come up, and also around Native Americans as well. I'm usually a woman who's able to get a lot of things done, and it's been really quite difficult to have my materials translated into a number of native languages. It's been one of the most difficult things I've tried to do throughout the whole project. It's been really fascinating. And if we have more time, we could talk about these issues, because I think that there are these issues around cultural divide we're cutting past one another in a way that is not helpful and useful to one another. And we've got to figure out, I'm trying to figure out in my own way, means of breaking through this silo. And so thank you very much for your question.
Thank you for answering. Passing it to Ashanti.
The question that I had was, how has your art process changed from the start of COVID? Because I know as an artist, my process as an artist has changed because I've kind of had to figure out a way to kind of like be creatively engaged in a way where it's like do simple things that like creatively keeps me in tune and not out of tune. So I just wanted to know, how has your process as an artist changed from now we're in the midst of COVID to pre-COVID?
Well, it hasn't really changed that much, actually, Ashante. I really do think that for the most part, and as you mature, I think also as an artist, you'll begin to sort of realize that a lot of your work is, again, dealing with the same questions over and over and over. They may change slightly, but they're core questions that you are really trying to get at. And so I am continuing to work. I'm working very deeply and very hard. I work every day. I'm in my studio almost every single day. I come to my studio every single day. And I think it's really an important part of my practice. It stabilizes me. It helps me to focus. Even when I'm tired, being able to go to my desk where my things are and to work and to think through a set of ideas is really important. And so I've been doing this consistently for a very long time. So finding your pattern, finding your method of work and being consistent about it, I think is really hard, even when you're exhausted, even when you're tired. You get up and you go to the same place as much as you possibly can every day to do your work. So yeah, being engaged is difficult, particularly when you don't have a sustained practice. So, but it will come with time. So thank you all so much for this wonderful conversation, for inviting me into your spaces wherever you are. I'm wishing you all safety, that I will see you maybe in Williamstown. I'd love to drive over there, in the summer. I love that area of the world. I taught at Hampshire for a few years, so I know the area quite well. And of course, I've taught at Williams College as well. So I wish you all the best. And I guess we'll turn it back over to Pam and let her close us out.
Carrie, I cannot thank you enough for this generous and honest and heartfelt and brilliant conversation. Thank you. Thank you to all of you students who've asked such great questions and engaged so deeply with all of Carrie's really important prompts. This has just been a moving conversation. I think we're all going to be thinking about the questions that we ask ourselves and how we ask ourselves those questions in a curious and engaged way. And we're just so grateful to you for the Resist COVID project here in the Northern Berkshires and Southern Vermont, and look forward to continuing the conversation, and very much look forward to that visit this summer. Please do drive over.
Well, it's been really wonderful to see how you've used the work. That's been very exciting. And I look forward to receiving all of the photographs, if not seeing them in person sometime soon, and all of the various things that you've made, the postcards and the bags and all those things. But I'm really happy to know that it's there. And Pamela, thank you so much for inviting me to the area and inviting me to be with the students tonight. They're just really wonderful. And again, even when I'm exhausted, I'm always exhilarated to be in a room filled with young people and young minds, thinking and talking and trying to figure out their way forward. So I salute you all. Have a wonderful rest of the semester, and hopefully see you soon. But be safe.
You be safe too. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the attendees for being with us tonight.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night.